folks. Obviously, I am not here live this week. I wasn't here last week live either. Never in all of the years we've been doing this have I missed 2 episodes like this, and believe me, if I could have avoided it, I would have. I was even until the last minute trying to figure out how I could be there with you on Friday, the morning of the 22nd of August. So I can't, but I didn't want to let this opportunity go without mentioning something that's been on my mind, without taking the opportunity at least to get us thinking about something that maybe we can address next week. Rosie the Resistance Bird has been quiet all afternoon, and now she of course she has things to say. It's related probably to what I'm talking about. So what I wanted to talk about today is not any one of the many crazy, unacceptable episodes that have been happening around us, almost beyond counting right now, right? There's so much happening. But I don't want to talk about any one individual. I want to talk about how we're watching them and thinking about them and looking at them and how we're evaluating them. So I'll mention what got me on this topic maybe yesterday, a day or two ago. So most of you probably know about the representative in Texas, Nicole Collier. The Republicans in Texas, in that legislature, decided that Democrats, if they wanted to leave the legislature, would have to sign permission slips that they get permission to leave and have officers trailing them wherever they go. And Nicole Collier said, yeah, no, I'm not signing a permission slip. I'm not going to be tailed by a police officer, no. And she thus was not allowed to leave without doing those things, and she slept overnight in the house in Texas. Now, I saw that, so let me actually say, that is after the other part of the story, which is these Texas Republicans redistricting Texas to very obviously skew the election in that state. I'll come back to that too. But what I was seeing was discussion of Nicole Collier, Representative Collier, and people asking things like, by what law are they allowed to do this? I think she went to the ladies' room and tried to talk on her phone with someone, and she was shut down. And I saw people saying like she was going to be charged with a felony. What felony? So here's the thing that was upsetting me, and I was blue skying away about it because I was upset. It doesn't matter what law they're using. That's unacceptable. That's so beyond the realm of what's normal. And there's so much around us. We're swimming amongst so much abnormality and broken laws and violated norms. There's so much of it that we forget the degree to which this isn't normal. So I actually had to step away from my computer yesterday because I kept saying, just think about how abnormal that is. Never mind the redistricting, which is huge in and of itself. They made these people sign permission slips, and they're being trailed by police, and because she wouldn't do it, she stayed there overnight. That is the most abnormal thing. Imagine it, if it helps, in the U.S. Congress. If that happened in the U.S. Congress, you would not think that was normal. So don't think, it's far away in Texas. That's crazy stuff. But we get caught up in the details about it. We recognize on some level it's wrong, and we begin thinking about what could make it right, what could make it right, and thus we go into conversations in our head like, what laws are they using, whereas that's not really relevant right now. What we have to focus on is the absolute abnormality of what was happening there, and that's true across the board, right? There are lots of people looking at the fact that there's ICE and any other number of armed paramilitary people, National Guard in Washington, D.C. And there has been a lot of talk about, how bad is crime anyway? I mean, is it helping with the crime? Maybe they're doing something for the crime. I mean, is there a lot of crime in Washington? I don't know. There are other cities that have crime. And here's the thing. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter how much crime is there or not. The National Guard has been called and is staking out American citizens. And based on everything I've read, they're in tourist areas, so they can be seen. They're not actually, even if we wanted to focus on that, it's not about crime. I think I saw this morning there were snipers on the top of Union Station. Once again, it doesn't matter. The crime part, wonder how much crime there is. That's their framing, right? That's them saying, well, we have good reason for this. We're fighting crime. We don't need that framing. The question is, how abnormal is this? And it's really abnormal, okay? So that's kind of what I wanted to say in my brief time here, is that as hard as it is and as overwhelmed as we're all feeling, I encourage you, I ask you to think about some of the things that are whizzing by us all the time, and people get wrapped up in is this allowed? I don't know if it's allowed. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's a crime. People get involved in asking the questions you ask if this was normal. But start out by asking yourself a question before you go into any other conversation. Is this actually normal? Is this normal? Because when you realize it isn't, you will realize, doesn't matter, crime statistics don't matter, this is on a whole different level. That's what I wanted to say today. Yesterday I got so angry because I kept saying, folks, they're holding her in there because she wouldn't sign a permission slip and let officers follow her around. On what level? And then they did that because between censuses, normally if you do redistricting, you do a census, you do redistricting, this is halfway through, not normally when that's done, and they're doing it in a way that's going to extremely benefit the Republican Party. There are many aspects about this that are not normal, and I was trying to say, guys, just on the level of this person being held in the house. Anyway, obviously I'm going to get upset again. And I stepped away because people weren't responding. And they began asking, what felony is she guilty of? So again, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm going to encourage you to think about. I mean, obviously till next week, but in weeks ahead. And the other thing I'll ask you to think about, so think about if it's normal. And I think it'll be pretty clear to you that it's not. You don't even necessarily have to know how it's abnormal. You just know, whoa, this is not a normal thing that we see. It would be nice if there were more press outlets talking about what normal is, right? That would be a fine thing. So, for example, with holding Representative Collier in the House, there are rules that every legislature makes at the beginning of its term about how they will engage in what they're doing, how they will treat each other, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And they don't say, we're going to ask you to have a permission slip and make you stay here overnight. And it's not that there's any reason why they would, but the fact of the matter is, at the beginning of every session, legislatures talk about how they need to treat each other, and they agree on a rule book equal, because they're equal in a legislature, and they're supposed to be debating and representing the interests of their constituents, and then there's a conclusion, and maybe they'll like it, and maybe they won't, and that's democracy. Jerry-rigging an election at a time when there's not supposed to be that sort of thing happening in this way, it would be wonderful if a loud press outlet would say, let's talk about how abnormal this is, about any of these things. Let's talk about how abnormal it is for the National Guard to be in Washington in the way they are now. It doesn't matter. The crime doesn't matter. We could talk about that at some point if you'd like, but that's not the part that's abnormal here. The abnormal part is National Guard standing around, basically watching Americans walk by, and apparently there's check stops or asking people to gather for their papers. And then 3, 4, 5, 6 other states have sent their National Guard, or have said they are going to, despite the fact that there's no reason, right? They're just signing up. So think about, ask yourself that question when you see something. Ask yourself, really easy question. Is this normal? Does this seem normal? And if your answer is actually no, then think to yourself, well, what would this normally be like? Or what would normally be happening in a normal legislature or a normal city or under normal circumstances with really, really divided political parties? Ask yourself, pause and think, not yet about the details when you see these things happening, and I realize it's hard and I do the same thing, but the first question you should ask yourself is this normal? And if your answer is no, then it's important to think about it. Then it's important to think about why it's happening. Then it's important to think about what the wanted outcome is, and then it's important to think about what the larger message of that is. We can't do anything about this situation if we can't step back and get beyond, is there crime, what's a felony? Step back and get to the point where we're saying, okay, here are the ways in which fundamental rights are being violated, right, in many ways. We know what it's supposed to be like, but now this is happening. That might help people also, maybe, I don't know, sort of walk towards the idea that authoritarianism is right in front of our face, and there are still people who can't see it. And I understand that. I understand that it's hard for any American to see it because we assume so many things about our country. American exceptionalism, bad things that happen other places, they don't happen here, right? So this won't happen here, and we're always okay. So whatever happens, we're going to be okay. And the fact of the matter is, none of that is true, and we're learning that in real time. Right? What happens other places can indeed happen here. In fact, it can be worse here than it is in some other places, and we have no idea how this is going to turn out. We don't, which is why it's important to step back and think about larger meanings. I've said this before. I'll close on this because at least it's a little uplifting. We're at a moment where, on the one hand, and I use the word contingency every single week for like 5 years on this podcast/webcast, so I'm going to use it again here. We're in this moment of extreme contingency, meaning we don't know what the hell's going to happen. It's like more than normal. We don't know where things are going next at all. We can predict things that we think, but we're off the tracks, right? So in that case, on the one hand, it is possible that things will go to hell in a handbasket, and it'll be really, really, really bad, even worse than it is now. Totally possible. We may even be leaning in that direction, folks. That's very possible. It's part of why it's important to think about what's happening around us and how abnormal it is. But in a moment of extreme contingency, you can do things or say things to make things different. And I'm not saying if we shout the right words or have the right argument that we're going to sort of defeat the bad guys. I'm not. But these kinds of moments, when everything is unsettled, they're moments when there can be unexpected new ways of things happening in a good way as well as in a bad way. I don't have the answer to what that means. I think we have to be thinking about different ways of conducting politics than the old way before. The old way before assumes a different world with different institutions, political institutions, and different norms about how people behave to get and keep power. But my larger point here is, as much as we're thinking, like, this is it, we're over, I'm not there yet, and I don't think we should be there yet, because it's too undecided now. And people in power right now want you to think it's over, and it isn't over. And they wouldn't be so eager to be marching troops around Washington to demonstrate how powerful they are if they felt more secure with where they are. So, always remember and think this way too, and talk to your community about it, and talk to your organizations about it. What could we do, or what could happen, or what would be wonderful in this moment that maybe we haven't done it before? We haven't acted in this way before. We haven't conducted politics in this way before. And maybe that would be a thing to do, a good thing. And maybe that thing hasn't happened before and would be more democratic, right? I was invited yesterday to go speak at, this community has a weekly session. I don't know, they call 100, 200, 300 people together in not a huge community every week, and they have a discussion and they bring people in to talk about what's happening. Now, maybe that's been happening before, but I'm not aware of it. And these are not big organizers. These are people who live in this place, and they meet every week to talk about what's happening. They contacted me because they want me to go and talk to them, and I'm probably going to do it. But apart from that, that's a new and interesting thing, a really good thing. We need to be thinking creatively in addition to thinking about and pinpointing what's abnormal. Okay, I'm repeating myself, so I will stop, and I'm also getting all wound up is what I was looking for. At any rate, I will leave you with that. We will be here as a group again next Friday. Maybe that's the 28th. I have no idea. But whatever that Friday is next week, we will be there, and I'm sure there will be 82 things we can talk about, and we can even talk, when we have the question and answer period, about some of what I said here. Everybody, be safe for the next week. Do things to calm yourself in the next week. It's very easy to forget that. I can testify. But just keep your eyes open and think about things in a bigger way than the specific questions that nip away at the details of what's happening and obscure the abnormality of it. Okay. I normally, in these episodes, I have a mug. And as dumb luck would have it, so for some of you who are new, for all of the weeks we've been doing this, and I don't even know, but it's like over 5 years, weekly, I have a mug that relates in some way or another to the theme that's been talked about. And dumb luck, because I was drinking coffee this morning while I was working. History matters, folks. History is one of the ways in which we can determine what is normal and what isn't. Okay, I now have even got my coffee mug. I will see all you guys next week. Bye, folks.